What is up, guys? J'espère que vous allez bien, que vous êtes en pleine forme. Bienvenue sur le podcast Conversation Awesome avec Karmakin. A place where we speak Franglish, say the word awesome a lot, mais surtout un endroit d'inspiration et d'éducation pour vous aider à optimiser votre santé globale from the inside out. Mon nom est Claudia, fondatrice de Karmakin, et ma mission avec ce podcast est de t'amener dans un monde de développement personnel, d'optimisation d'habitudes de vie et de découverte so you can unleash your potential and live the life you truly want and deserve. Merci d'être à l'écoute. You're awesome. Bienvenue tout le monde dans cette nouvelle conversation awesome avec Karmakin. J'espère que vous allez bien. Pour ma part, je suis super excited puisque j'ai l'honneur d'avoir ma première invitée spéciale pour cette conversation. Et l'entrevue aura lieu en anglais puisque j'ai my beautiful, inspiring, awesome friend and coach with me, Sara Fennell. Et avant de plonger dans notre conversation, je voulais vous parler un petit peu de son background qui est super inspirant. Donc, Sara a commencé sa carrière professionnelle en tant qu'hygiéniste dentaire, mais elle s'est rendue compte rapidement que ça n'allait pas être sa passion pendant très, très longtemps. Elle a plongé dans le fitness, l'entraînement, les compétitions de bodybuilding, utilisé la nutrition pour changer son corps, étudier le holistic nutrition. Donc, pendant plusieurs années, c'était vraiment la partie majeure de sa vie, autant pour elle au niveau personnel que pour au niveau professionnel. Donc, elle aime bien dire que par accident, elle a construit une business de coaching en ligne pour aider les femmes à transformer leur corps, tout en ayant elle-même sa propre transformation au niveau compétitif, puis après ça, au niveau plutôt holistique. Elle a d'ailleurs reçu son IFBB Pro Card, en plus d'avoir fait le cover de plusieurs magazines. Donc, elle était vraiment présente et elle avait une super belle influence dans ce domaine-là. En très peu de temps, elle a construit une business très, très, très successful au niveau du coaching chez les femmes pour transformer un petit peu son coaching vers du business coaching il y a environ 5 ans avec son fiancé Joe Arco, qui est aussi mon coach. À deux, ils ont créé un mentorship, un mastermind, des programmes, des formations, des cours en ligne pour permettre aux gens comme moi, des fitness professionals, des coachs de vie, des network marketers, de faire grandir leur business, mais aussi de grandir en tant qu'entrepreneur. Et c'est ce que j'adore de leur approche. Oui, on parle marketing, on parle tactique, on parle branding, on parle système, on parle de chiffres, mais on parle aussi de qui on est en tant que personne derrière la business. Est-ce qu'on prend soin de nous? Est-ce qu'on a des bonnes habitudes au niveau de notre propre santé physique? Est-ce qu'on arrive à bien gérer notre temps et planifier notre semaine pour être productive? Est-ce qu'on a une vie remplie de fun and games and hobbies? Puisque j'adore leur approche et ça faisait longtemps que je les suivais sur les réseaux sociaux à travers le podcast de Sara, The Fulfillment Project, j'ai rencontré Joe dans un séminaire, j'ai suivi leurs cours gratuits, leurs infolettes, leurs posts sur les réseaux sociaux et je voulais vraiment travailler de façon plus proche avec eux puisqu'ils m'inspiraient vraiment beaucoup en tant qu'entrepreneur, mais surtout en tant que personne. Donc personnellement, j'ai fait leur mentorship à l'été 2018 et je suis maintenant dans leur mastermind depuis, my God, presque un an. Donc, dans les dernières années, les deux ont été vraiment un gros pilier, un gros morceau qui m'ont aidé à grandir en tant qu'entrepreneur, à faire croître ma business et aussi à juste me développer à chaque semaine, à chaque jour, au niveau de mon développement personnel et même spirituel. Speaking of which, une autre chose que j'admire beaucoup de Sara, c'est qu'elle est super ouverte sur ses propres défis, ses propres difficultés. Par exemple, elle a été diagnostiquée bipolaire il y a plusieurs années. Elle a malheureusement eu le breast implant illness. Elle est très ouverte au niveau de tout ce qui est dépression, burn-out, anxiété. Et malgré tout ça, elle continue de se développer personnellement, de faire les efforts, de show up, de se réinventer. Tout ça dans une énergie qui est tellement tout le temps positive et inspirante. Donc, pour toutes ces raisons, je suis super contente de vous l'introduire aujourd'hui à travers mon podcast. Elle m'a d'ailleurs beaucoup aidé à mettre ce projet-là sur pied. Sara a son propre podcast qui s'appelle The Fulfillment Project, dont je vous encourage fortement à aller vous abonner à son podcast. Et aujourd'hui, on a une conversation super spéciale à vous présenter, mais je vous en dis pas plus. Let's dive in right away into our awesome conversation. All right, welcome Sara to the awesome conversation with Karmakin. Thanks you for being here.
Oh, Thank you so much for having me. Congrats on your show.
Thank you. And yes, I really wanted to have you as my first guest because you're a big part of this coming together, the podcast, the inspiration. Your own podcast was a huge inspiration. And then you helping me with the techie side of everything. So yeah, super grateful to have you as my first official guest.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's fun to teach people who have such a great voice and a message, bring that all together onto a platform like this. So yay!
Yay, thank you so much. So yeah, speaking of, message, inspiring people, on these awesome conversations, I always try to get topics and tools and strategies and mindset shifts to help women feel aligned and fulfilled and healthy from the inside out. So today we're going to have a bit of a different topic. We're not going to talk about nutrition or how to squat to have, nice glutes. I want us to dive into what is feminine and masculine energy. I know you've been doing the work as I have, and you've been helping me balance that, and it's always a work in progress. And we both have history of, burning out and not listening to that side of us. So I want to dive into all of this. But before we get started, can you quickly chat about your background, what you do, how did you come up with the work and practicing balancing feminine, masculine energy and all of that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You were talking about, aligning and living in fulfillment. And I think it's something we all want, but we just don't know how to pursue that, or we're not sure about the path to go down, or if we're doing something right or wrong. And it's been something that I've been in constant search of, and something that I'm constantly working on. I always thought I wanted to be a dental hygienist, and that's the path I took. And as soon as I got into that line of work in my early 20s, I quickly realized that it was not for me. And so within 4 to 6 months of landing a job as a dental hygienist and realizing, oh my goodness, I've been working towards this. This doesn't feel right. I don't see myself doing this for more than at least another couple years, let alone 30 years of my career. And I was at a point where I felt lost. I felt lost in my life, and I didn't know what I was going to do, because when you're so one-track minded and then you get to that and you realize it's not the outcome that you wanted, it leaves you in a little bit of a void. And so I had found fitness at that point. I had found personal development at that point. And I also found fitness competitions. And throwing myself into that world allowed me to not really think about my career type of world, and learning how to transform the body and how a woman actually gets in shape, like chiseled shoulders and abs, and, not just a little bit of weight loss, but a full transformation. I started sharing that information online back in 2009. I mean, I'm talking
pre-Instagram.
Yeah, way pre-Instagram. Facebook was not what it is. YouTube was really just coming up. And so I was excited because, up until that point, I thought the healthy subs at Subway and Activia yogurt and Special K bars were the way to lose weight and get in shape.
Count your calories.
Yeah. And so when I actually learned, about whole food nutrition and supporting the body from a holistic, comprehensive perspective, I thought, oh my goodness, more women need to know about this. And I started sharing that journey on Facebook and on YouTube, and accidentally grew a community, accidentally had women demanding to want to work with me. So I became a personal trainer, launched an online and in-person business by 2011, ended up quitting dental hygiene by 2012. If you want to talk about alignment and really just getting onto the right path, I followed my heart. I put myself into something that I was passionate about and started sharing a message, and I accidentally started a business, and the rest has just been absolutely incredible in terms of my journey. There's always the ups and downs, but it was in 2016 when I started to get more into the business coaching side of things. Getting into more conversations with people like you who are so passionate about what you do and really great with clients, but we're lacking on the marketing side, the systems, the tech side of things. And I realized I had a skill there. And so now for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been business coaching alongside with my fiance, Joe Arco.
Amazing. And yeah, for sure. So I did the mentorship with you guys a few years ago. Time just flies by. I remember I met Joe at a summit in Toronto in 2017, and I was so in awe of his speech, and I was like, wow, what a man, And I just went to shake his hand at the end, and in my head I was like, one day we're going to be best friends. So I'm super grateful for your journey and my journey, and then working with you guys, and yeah, just balancing and learning about the business and, like you said, the marketing, the tactics, the strategies, making sure that what you do, you actually love doing that, serving your clients. But I'm a bit of a workaholic, and so are you.
Amen to that, honey.
Yeah, because we're so passionate, and because we decided to be aligned with what we do, and we love it, we want to serve our clients, we want to change the world. it's hard sometimes to step back and step away from achieving, goal setting, what's next, always being hungry for more. And I know you've been through that, and we can chat about that, and I've been through it. And to me, it was like, okay, I gotta go, guys. Like, I'm jumping on a plane tomorrow because I need to go to the beach because I'm burnt out. I'm depressed. I'm crying. I have no more energy, and not allowing myself to step back and have permission to slow down and step into that feminine energy. Yeah. So let's first, anybody who's never really heard about this concept of feminine, masculine energy, what does it mean? Is it totally related if you're female and male? So let's just talk about that for somebody who has no clue what we're talking about.
Great question. So masculine, feminine energy has nothing to do gender-wise. So Claudia, you have both masculine and feminine energy. I have both masculine and feminine. A male, let's say Joe, my fiance, for example, has both masculine and feminine energy. It has to do with, we all have a core essence. And most of the time, not always, females will have more of a feminine energy and males will have more of a masculine energy. There are obviously different situations, but for the most part, let's say like 95% of the time, that's what it is. And so if you are a core feminine energy, but you are not honoring that feminine energy and you're operating more in a masculine energy, and we'll get into some examples, you'll end up being completely imbalanced. Myself discovering this was more of like an unlayering process because I was going through periods of burnout, like what you mentioned. And so, you know, you learn about burnout from the adrenal side of things. Okay, let's support my adrenals. Let's, you know, watch my stress levels. Let's make sure my nutrition is good. You know, let's support the body. And when you're doing all of the things in order to support the physical body, but you still end up in cycles of burnout, that's what led me down the path of just trying to uncover more different layers. And this is when I discovered the masculine versus feminine energy and realizing how much I was operating in my masculine and just completely burning myself out. And so as an example, so if we think about masculine energy, and you know, when I say energy, it's not like a physical energy like caffeine that gives you energy. Let's say like an operating system of energy. And so the masculine energy is very linear. It's very goal focused, outcome focused, planning, logic. You know, if you think about conquering, that type of thing. And I love that. Like, I'm a goal. I'm a high performer. I'm like, give me the plan. I'll do it. I like the check marks. I love, like, you know, checklist through my day, you know, having those markers of knowing if I'm actually accomplishing something. And, you know, women who go into business, like business is very masculine because it is very outcome driven. So you have to have those outcomes. Yeah. Same with fitness. Fitness it's a very masculine type of thing, like movement of the, like counting reps, trying to get to a number on a scale, you know, having goals, like it's very masculine. And so the feminine energy, this is allowing and surrendering and just being in the moment. And even those words allowing and surrendering, they still give me that like feeling inside of me. You know, it's not outcome focused. It's very much in the moment. It is about connection. It is very much about love. It is about like allowing and surrendering. Like that's the best way that I can explain it. And so, for example, like nature, Mother Nature is very feminine. It is constantly changing. Its change can be unpredictable. It's constantly growing. It's always in movement. And that's the feminine. It loves movement. It loves a lot of change. It loves unpredictability because it will allow and surrender to whatever comes to it. Right. And, you know, I don't know exactly where my full-blown masculine side really started, but I think, you know, we live in a very predominant masculine world. A young age, we're basically told a trajectory of school of what we're going to do and what do you want to be and, you know, what do you want to do for a career. And so we're always looking into the future for goals, especially with the way that the modern day workplace is set up. It's very masculine. And so we're in a culture now where women are exhausted. Women are burnt out. Women are in the workforce, plus trying to nurture and be a mother and take care of a household. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong about women being in the workforce at all, but we're just not honoring that core essence side of ourselves. So we end up feeling lost, disconnected, unaligned. And it's that almost that restless feeling inside of you that something doesn't feel right, but you just don't know what it is. And with learning all this, I've had to almost deprogram my operating system, we'll call it that, and ways of operating. For me, slowing down, allowing, surrendering, for me, I thought it was weak. it feels very like you're not goal focused, you're not working towards something. And so it's very hard for me to slow down.
Yeah, it's almost like, to me anyway, I was like, okay, if I'm in my feminine energy, I'm not productive. I feel like feminine is more like being and masculine is more like doing.
100%.
Right? So when you balance that out, like when I'm in my feminine, then am I lazy? Am I just giving up on my goals and my ambition and like my targets? Am I just, wasting time? I would feel guilty for being in that state. So
yes, exactly. And I can even think back to my childhood. My dad was laid off through the 90s. And so my mom was the sole breadwinner for a while. And she lived in a pretty high anxiety state. But that woman didn't stop. And she's always like 10 stoplights ahead, I'll call it, thinking about what's coming down the pipeline. And, all of our days were planned out. And I just felt like I was just on this like hamster wheel of my mom of like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. And so I definitely inherited a lot of my masculine from her. And, as children, we model from our parents. And so seeing a woman who never stopped, who definitely lived in anxiety, who was burnt out most of her days, but, God bless her, she didn't show it. We take on that. And we think like that is just normal. And with the world around us telling us that, we're supposed to be such goal-driven and focused people. And we need to learn to fall back into our feminine. And so if you think about the feminine is very receiving as well. And receiving can be a hard thing, whether you are receiving compliments, whether you are receiving love, help, support, money, like all of that stuff. And so much of my life was like, I'm going to work really hard in order to get those things. I'm going to work really hard so I deserve the time off. Yeah. I'm going to work really hard for money and feel like I deserve it, as opposed to being in action, but also being in a place of receiving. And receiving is not a full force ahead. Receiving is actually pulling back. Yeah, it is doing some work and pulling back and allowing that to come in.
Yeah, allowing that space for it to come in.
Space, yeah, big time. And how many people feel awkward with space in their life? Or you have a day that clears and you're like, I don't know what to do with myself.
Should, right?
I should do this, I should do that. Yeah.
I still struggle with that.
Yes. And I've been working on this for about 3 to 4 years now. And within the last year, I've really allowed myself to sink into this allowing and receiving and relaxing and just being. But it's a hard process. It is. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
So before we dive into like how to actually dive into that process, I feel like a lot of us are not even aware that we're in that masculine energy or that feminine energy. And we almost have to get to a point where we burn out and we're like, I'm going to the beach, or I need to call my doctor and get, a note from my doctor that I can't work anymore. So what are some ways that right now we can kind of prevent that from happening and just being aware and creating that awareness that like, oh, maybe I'm unbalanced a little bit? Are there any like specific signs? Or is there anything that you were catching yourself doing or thinking before you got to that burning phase? Or...
Yeah, so even looking at like a typical week for yourself and, go through a typical week and look back. What was I doing? Was I always in specific actions that were constantly moving forward? Did I have any space just for myself? Did I have space where I was connecting, with other women or family members, having that deep connection with yourself? Was I getting outside? Which is almost doing, we do time audits in business. Yeah. It's almost doing an audit of your life and looking at what are the actions that I'm taking and which energy am I in mostly? But I mean, like if you're a woman and you're exhausted and you feel like you're on just a hamster wheel, but you can't step off that hamster wheel, you're way too much in your masculine. Like that is a sign like right there. Yeah. First off, yeah. But even just doing an audit of your week, how are you spending most of your time? Where is your head at most of the time? Like, do you feel like you can breathe in your weeks? We've talked about that, Claudia, of like you go away on vacation and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can breathe. Because the pressure comes off you. There's no expectations on you. Whether you do something now or later, it doesn't matter. And so that's a big sign that you're too in your masculine. When you get a moment, you're just like, oh my goodness, thank you.
Absolutely. I had to unlearn that being in my feminine was not going to affect my productivity. And like I said, what I have to do in a week, right? Yes. So how can you explain that it's actually possible to be productive and achieve your goals and have an awesome business and do all the things when you're actually being more balanced with your feminine? Yes.
And so the way I kind of looked at it, because when I was learning about all this, I was like you, I'm like, I know it, but putting it into practice is very different. And so I would be aware of all this and then find myself like I'd keep burning out or keep, living in anxiety or just not happy with my days or lack of fulfillment, we can call it. And so I found myself almost like a roller coaster. Like things would be going good and life would be great and I'm like achieving and things are feeling good, and then I'd hit a lull. And so when you're constantly on this roller coaster, it's such highs and lows of emotions and energies that you almost seem like it's counterintuitive. Like you're stepping 2 steps forward and 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because you're so go, go, go in the forward motion that you're forced to step back. Whether you burn out emotionally, energetically, mentally, whether you just can't take on anymore, whether you start snapping at people because you get irritable, whether you find like you're living in anxiety and you're forced to pull back. So if you see yourself doing any of those things, that's definitely you're too imbalanced.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question for that?
But that makes so much sense. And like, I have so many more questions coming up, but the question was more like, how to explain to people who have like this block that no, if I'm too much of my feminine, I won't be productive.
Yes.
I won't achieve my goals.
Yeah. And so what I learned is even, instead of going full force at like 110%, if I go at 80% consistently, I actually get further ahead. I feel more balanced. I have more energy in all bodies within myself. And I actually am more happy and fulfilled. And it's the sustainable energy. And how many times do we feel like we're just running on fumes? You feel like you're just running on fumes and it's like you're on the treadmill that is constantly pulling you forward because you can't step off because there's this next deadline and this priority and this next deadline. And you're just like, I don't even see like the end of this. And so learning to balance my weeks and balance my days and not put too much on my plate and making sure I'm getting out in nature. And I know we're going to get into like how to fix some of this stuff. But learning that it doesn't have to always be full force ahead, that you can do things. I don't even want to say, in moderation, because it's not in moderation, but it's balancing how much of a different energy that you're using. Like you'll go into debt, right? Like energy, I kind of think about like a bank account. So if you're draining too much of one account, you get into debt. So you need to restore that.
Yeah. I call it my tank, like my energy tank is full and I give. That's like the masculine, achieve. But then if nothing kind of fuels my tank again, I'm going to run on empty, on fumes, right? So
yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's also realizing, it's a bit like nutrition. It's better to go 80% your whole month than doing 100% Monday to Friday. And then like on the weekends, you go down to like 20%. So again, that consistency, I always tell my clients that, and even on like the other episodes here on the podcast, it's not a sexy word that everybody wants to hear, but it's so important, right? Yeah.
A good example, if you want to think about masculine and feminine energy, think about way back in our civilizations, king and queen energy. So the king is the conqueror. He is strategizing, he's planning, he's sending his troops, he's taking care of the community. Whereas the queen, she's still very powerful, but she's not in so much of a forward action. She just is. And her just being her is powerful in itself. And that is hard. And this is going to sound fluffy, but I'm going to say it. But women will attract a lot more to their lives by not pushing forward. And even in business, I don't know if you have a lot of business people who listen, but women who are totally in their masculine and not pulling back and allowing that receivership, they'll actually make less money. Or it'll feel very hard to make money. And so when life feels very hard and like you're pushing it forward, you're not in the right energy.
Yeah. And that was me in 2020, that shift that I did. I was like, okay, yes, income goals are important, but let me set some impact goals. Let me lead with love. And love is my theme for 2021, right? My business boomed, my income went through the roof, especially in the last couple months. So I was like, wow, I'm actually focusing on being in a nice flow, a nice state. Still setting the targets, and obviously you got to do what you got to do. And we're not saying that masculine energy is all wrong and bad,
No.
It can serve you definitely, but like you said, it's the balance between the two.
Yeah.
So,
and if you think about like feminine energy is radiant. So when you can get in your radiance, and we've all had it where you feel amazing, and maybe someone says, "Oh my God, you're glowing," and you're like, "I know." That is when you are in your feminine, and people will be attracted to you, and that is the power of the feminine. Is people will just come to you. Good things will just come to you. People will offer you things, and you'll realize that you feel like you get into this nice flow as opposed to a push.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, if I can do a bit of a parallel, when you're like working all day and you're like, oh, I should be taking like 10 minutes off to go for a walk or just stretch. that will help my focus, my concentration, my productivity when I go back to work. But then there's a tiny voice that's like, no, don't take off of work because you have so much to do. So it's realizing that break, that work break, will actually help you step back into work and then be more productive and all of that. But sometimes we're like, no, if I step away from work, I have stuff to do. So it's like the same thing with if I step away from my masculine driven energy. Well, no, by you stepping back, when you step back in the to-do list and the achieving, you're going to be, like you said, aligned, glowing, fulfilled, and just more balanced to step back into that energy. So it's the same kind of concept.
And it's fear. It's fear that drives us where we feel like we can't slow down. And when you feel like you can't slow down is when you need to slow down the most. Yeah. And how many times have you said like, oh my God, I wish I did this sooner. Went on vacation. I wish I did this sooner. I wish I took a day off sooner. I wish I just loved myself more sooner. I wish I allowed myself this space for me sooner.
Absolutely. Nobody regrets going in nature to have a walk or taking time for themselves and everything. So let's talk about guilt before we dive into how do we do that, step into our feminine energy. Guilt was something that I know you experienced, probably still do. For me, that's a huge thing. Feeling guilty for stepping away from working and serving and achieving the goals. I don't even have an answer for this, but like, let's talk about this. How do we get able to step away from that guilt and just being okay with taking time off or taking time for ourselves?
This has been a hard one for me, especially as a fellow people pleaser. Claudia,
recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called The Fulfillment Project. If you're interested, anybody listening here, I had Claudia on. We were talking about people pleasing. And so guilt always comes back to, we think there are expectations on ourselves that we create in our own minds. And so, I have noticed over the years that when I feel my best and I feel in my radiant, my radiant self, I have more to give. And that's been something that I've had to learn, because we can be in action and do what we know or what we think we're supposed to do. But do you feel good? Do you actually want to be present in that conversation? Is your full self coming through in whatever that is, whether you're with clients or whether you're with friends or whether you're with family or whatever you're doing? We've all had moments where we're kind of just going through the motions versus being completely 100% like present. Like right now, like this conversation, I am here with you. It's not just another thing in my day. And so I've realized that self-care and stepping into that feminine energy is what I need so I can show up as my fullest self. Because especially as a business owner, like we're choosing to do this. Like I choose to run a business. I choose to bring on clients. I choose to do the work I do. Same with yourself. And so if you're making those choices, don't you want to make sure that those choices are being made in the right energy so that you fully enjoy it? And so that takes taking care of you first. And that I've had to learn, to give up that guilt, to realize it's not selfish, and to realize I'm actually serving people more by serving myself first.
That's huge.
Yes.
That was a big aha moment for me too, And that's why they always say in the plane, you put your little mask on before you help somebody else.
The oxygen mask theory, yes.
Like, that's why, because who can I help if I'm in Cuba crying, broken down? Like, nobody. So realizing that was a huge help for me.
And especially as, such goal-driven, ambitious women, and there are more and more women in this world who have huge ambitions, and it wasn't really praised for women to have ambitions outside of a household or raising a family. And I'm so glad I'm born in this time. But as ambitious women, we have to know how to nurture ourselves and our feminine side, or else we're going to feel extremely disconnected from the things that we're achieving.
It's our true nature from like years and years and years and years ago.
And so like women are not, and so if you look at, let's say a woman who has children and she's raising a family, raising a family is actually very masculine because it's very giving. But I mean, cleaning the house, taking care of the household, that's all very giving things. And so, but if you look at before women were really in the workforce, they did those things, but they had a lot of space. They had a lot of space. And then, when, her man came back home or, the children were there, she could be in that masculine energy. And so the thing is, we don't have space anymore. They're put into the workforce where they have things to do and deadlines and all that trajectory of like checklist, plus they get home, they have to take care of the household, they have to take care of everybody else, that they literally have no space for themselves. We're also not in a society where, especially so we're in COVID right now, connection is such a feminine energy. And if we're not filling our cup to connect with other people, and that's something I pushed off so much, I don't have time to get together. Right. I don't have time to catch up. Yeah. I don't have space to do all these like awesome things and connecting with other women, which is something that I massively prioritize now. So it's realizing the modern day world that we live in that is not set up in order to support that feminine energy, but knowing how to really navigate around it.
Yeah. So how do we do that? How do we step back into our feminine, especially because women, they're busy, like you said, kids, work, everything. The thing I hear most often is, I don't have time. I wish I could. I should do this. I should take a day off. I should jump into the bath an hour every night. But they don't have time. They don't prioritize it. Maybe they didn't even know they were not balanced between these two energies. So how do we get started? Yeah.
And so this was hard for me. And the number one thing I needed to learn was my goals and ambitions will never go away. And I thought that I had to give up being the ambitious person I was because it was running me into the ground. And that is not it at all. So anybody listening here, like, please go after your dreams and be as ambitious as you possibly can. But know how to counterbalance that. And so getting out in nature is like non-negotiable for me now. And these are things like, so I would listen to podcasts of people talking about these things and rattling off the list that I'm going to tell you here. I would almost resist it. And so I find women who are too much in their masculine resist the feminine stuff. So getting out into nature, taking a bath for yourself, even just sitting and reading a book where there's no like,
I have to read 2 chapters today and
2 chapters today, or I'm going to get through 20 pages. Like just like time in order to do something, or a day of flow where you're not focused on time. You have no appointments. There's nowhere to be. You're going to be productive, but that flow where you're flowing in and out of tasks. Playing is a very feminine thing. Rich foods inside of us, connecting with people, conversation, and just a lot of space and no expectations.
That's a big one. And we both started doing this like on Friday, free flow.
Yes.
Right? Like I can work, but I also, not work if it's not planned or if I don't feel like I want to work.
Yeah.
So maybe like if you're super busy, have a crazy schedule, maybe start... Even if it's 5 minutes here and there, just go outside for 5 minutes, right? And I talk about habits all the time, and you need to have your strategies to put your habits in place, because we know in our conscious mind, I know going out in nature is good for me. I know taking time off is good for me, but we don't do it if we don't plan it. And planning it, I know that's a masculine thing, but it actually helped me at first. When I first started into like trying to balance everything, I was like, okay, let me go check my week, and then I will plan some free flow feminine energy on Friday between 1 to 5. Yes. And then Joe was like, because I told him, I was like, I want to be more spontaneous, like do things for fun, step away from work. And he was like, you're planning your spontaneous afternoon? I was like, yeah. He's like, that's not being spontaneous. I was like, step 1, Joe, step 1. Yes. Yeah. So planning in your agenda, like that was super helpful for me. And then it just becomes almost automatic, right?
Yeah. Even like when I work, I'll diffuse some oils. So the feminine loves like beauty. It loves... If you think about beauty, whether that is dressing up and like putting makeup on for the day, like that is a very feminine thing. Being in environments that, you can see the beauty in. So just making sure that you're surrounding yourself with those feminine energies, like diffusing oils, rich environments, rich foods that fill you up. So the feminine is all about filling up, receiving, bringing in. And scheduling it is something that I did as well. Because you need to get out of your own habits, and you almost need that reminder of like, okay, so this is a space where I'm going to do this. Because breaking habits or creating new rituals always takes such a conscious awareness. So if we're going to need to be conscious in order to make this happen, put in your schedule so that you actually remember to
strategy. And that helped me take away the guilt, because I was like, I can actually really enjoy this Friday afternoon because it was planned.
Yes.
If it wasn't planned, and I would have been like, oh, I have a Friday off, I should be working. I should be doing more in my work.
Yeah.
But then, no, I had planned to take the afternoon off or go in nature, blah, blah, blah. Yes. So for the guilt that we were talking about earlier, that was super helpful for me.
Yeah. And just being aware of how, and this is all just about awareness, right? Like you have to be aware of how you're doing these things and how they're making you feel. And for the longest time, I found myself on that almost like roller coaster, like back and forth. Like I'd feel so good with my practices, and then something would come up, or I'd be like, I can't focus on that right now, or I don't have time.
Yeah.
And so I'd say for the past year now, I've been consistent with allowing feminine energy in every single day, whether it's my work schedule, the way I set up calls. Joe and I take what's called recess breaks where we get outside. Every morning I'm outside instantly. I find sometimes you almost have to run yourself into the ground so much where you're like, okay, I'm listening. Like I will integrate this. And when you really start being conscious as to like how these rituals really fill you up, you'll want to keep doing them. Much like we all know that eating clean foods make you feel better than
working out.
Than eating junk food. Yeah. And I mean, if we can kind of compare nutrition, you know, we've all been on trends where nutrition is amazing, or then we fall off track, or you go traveling, or you're eating too much junk food and you just feel like bogged down and like heavy. Yeah. And then you clean it back up and you're like, oh God, like why didn't I do this sooner? Right. Yeah. And so the feminine energy is very much like that, you know, just creating habits and rituals and understanding, you know, that dynamic from the masculine to the feminine. And if I can say this as well, it's almost like getting out of your head and into your body. Like how much do you live in your head? The running to-do list. I should. I could.
I have to do this. I have to remember to do this.
Yes.
And
even like a good thing that I started as well is exercise is very much a masculine thing, but flow type of movements are very feminine. So like yoga or like a stretch flow, that is very feminine. The feminine it's constant motion. So if we're looking at just like, you know, 3 sets of 10 reps, that's very linear and it's very like one-dimensional. Whereas like flowing with some music is very feminine. Like flowers, like bringing flowers into your home is something that I did as well. Yeah, just all those little things added up, they make a huge difference.
And it's a process, ladies, okay? Because even hearing Sara now saying some example, like, I would never bring flowers in, right? There's some resistance. And I'm sure you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have time for this. And obviously your patterns and your programming will tell you all the reasons why you don't want to be stepping into that energy. But, you know, be curious, awareness, and start small. 5 minutes a day, do something for you. I call it me time. I have clients, I'm like, please check in your calendar when you do your me time. So you can mix and match the feminine and the masculine. They both have their place. But like you said, you have to be balanced and aware when you're not.
One area too I want to bring up is the relationship, the dynamics in a relationship. And so we live in a culture where there are a lot of masculine women and men are actually being demasculinized. I have found, especially with some friends and even in my own relationship as well, if I am in my masculine too much, I butt heads with Joe. And, you know, if anybody's listening here and, you know, you are identifying as a really masculine woman and maybe you're struggling in your relationship, especially from like an intimacy level, maybe you're not allowing him to be in his masculine, like controlling, dominating, you know, always critiquing. That's a very masculine thing. And so if we're trying to control, dominate, and critique our men, we are not going to be attracted to them because 2 alphas do not mix well together, right? So like in the actual animal kingdom, there can never be 2 alphas, like ever. And so that very much works in the human society as well. Like, you know, you can always tell if you get a group of people in a room, there will always be an alpha. Same with feminines as well. And with men, you know, you'll see like 2 men really butt heads because they're 2 alpha. And so if you have an intimate dynamic of a relationship and you have a woman being too much in her masculine, not allowing the man to be in his, it's going to be really hard for you to connect on an intimate and emotional level because those energies are clashing. That was a huge thing with Joe and I. I've had to learn even like to close out my masculine day and get into my feminine. Like I'll go take a bath. I'll rub like lotion all over my body. I'll make sure I've closed out my mind from work because it really affects the relationship.
Yeah. Tony Robbins talks a lot about that, you know, when you're depolarizing in your relationship. And the women, when she feels unseen or not understood or unsafe, then she's not safe in her feminine energy. And then when the man feels critiqued that the woman's like closing off because she's in her masculine, mind driven, it's super interesting to see that, but it makes so much sense. And it's hard when you're in a dynamic, whether it's the dynamic of your work or business, whether it's the dynamic of your relationship, the relationship with yourself, you know, these are things you need to unlearn. And so it doesn't happen overnight. But if you're aware and you're constantly making little shifts and kind of being aware and analyzing and seeing like, okay, this does feel better or this does work. And I mean, like I said, it's been like 3 or 4 years of me shifting where now I feel like I know when I can be in my feminine and that I'm not weak. It doesn't make me soft. Like I've never resonated as like a girly girl. And just realizing that you are who you are. So if you're someone who's ambitious and driven and like you accomplish big things, that will always be you.
And so allowing yourself to, surrender and allow and receive doesn't make you weak, and you will still conquer, if not more.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
it will amplify
Yes.
your gifts and your potential and your light.
Yes.
Yes. Big lesson learned. Amazing. So yeah, guys, I would definitely start with awareness. So if this conversation sparked thoughts, ideas, write them down. Like Sarah said, audit your week, see how you're spending your time, if it's all like masculine driven task or, at work and with your kids. And then start planning some 5 minutes here and there, or like half an hour on the weekend, and pick one thing. Nature, bath, get some essential oils, whatever you need. And then just start, again, being aware of like, how am I feeling when I'm in that state?
Yes.
And I'm sure you'll feel great.
Yes. And I mean, we all want to be happy. We all want to feel fulfilled. We all want to feel peace in our lives, and we want to feel like we're in a good flow. And so if we're not cautious of these things, or learning about the different dynamics of who we are as a human, and when we talk about energy, it's not something that's tangible. Like you can't see it, but you feel it. But you feel it. It's like walking into a room and you can feel tension. That's energy. Yeah. And so we are energetic beings. If we don't know how to work with the energy within ourselves, then like what I said earlier, we're going to feel like we're pushing life as opposed to flowing with it.
Yeah. But we have to be able to stop and listen to that energy.
Which is hard in this day and age.
It is, because it's always like, okay, what's next? And then you never even stop to ask yourself, how am I feeling? What's my energy like? Am I aligned? Am I motivated? I hate that word, motivation. I always tell them, no, motivation doesn't last. Let's use another word. But all that to say that you have to allow space in your week to stop, be in tune with your body, and just ask questions, and the answers will come up. Yes. Amazing. I love this. Awesome. So I'm the queen of the quotes. And for my podcast, I always finish with an inspiring quote. So I want to ask you, Sarah, what's one of your favorite quotes and why?
Oh, that's a big question.
It
I have a spot with.
So many quotes.
Oh my goodness.
Or a mantra, or like an intention, or word, or...
Yeah. Honestly, just like live every day aligned. And that is constant like calibration and auditing. Like live each day aligned, because I feel like we see this straight line of like how we want to feel and what we want to happen, but we detour off of it. So it's like always just coming back to that alignment of the direction that we want to go into. Yeah. So live every day aligned.
Live every day aligned, guys. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Super grateful to have you as my first guest on this podcast, and I appreciate your help the last 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Claudia. I'm so proud of you.
J'espère que cette conversation awesome t'a inspiré. Et d'ailleurs, I would love to hear back from you. Rejoins Karmakin sur les réseaux sociaux and tag me in a post pour partager ce que tu retiens de cet épisode. Je serais vraiment grateful aussi si tu pouvais me laisser un rating and review pour le podcast. Ça me permet d'avoir un impact positif sur plus de gens comme toi. Merci beaucoup d'avoir été à l'écoute, and until next time, je te souhaite une journée awesome.